The scent of old leather and entitlement clung to the air in the Johnson family study. A room, her fortunes were decided and daughters were traded. Edward Johnson swirled the amber liquid in his crystal glass, the ice clinking a smug rhythm against the sides. The Smith family project is nearly secured, he announced to his father, Bruce, and his conspicuously silent younger brother, Howard. Marrying Claire to their eldest son will seal the deal. It's a perfect arrangement. Howard, slouched in a wingback chair, finally looked up from his phone. A cynical smirk played on his lips. You're selling your own daughter to that idiot, Thomas Smith, the one who thinks asset diversification is owning a sports car in every color. He scoffed, the sound sharp and grating in the hushed room. Even for you, Edward, that's a new low. She's a country bumpkin who has spent 18 years living in obscurity, Edward retorted, his voice dripping with condescension. This is more than she could ever dream of. She serves a purpose. Finally, my purpose is my own. The voice was quiet, yet it sliced through the tension like a razor. All three men turned. Framed in the grand doorway stood Claire. She wore a simple, faded cotton dress and worn sneakers, an utter anomaly in the opulent mansion. She had been summoned here only an hour ago, torn from the only quiet life she'd ever known, and her presence was a stark, unwelcome reminder of a past Edward preferred to forget. Her eyes, however, held a fire that no amount of neglect could extinguish. What is the meaning of this? Edward sputtered, his face flushing with anger. Look at you, dressed like a common servant. Have you no manners? Bursting in here. Claire took a step forward, her chin held high. Manners? You want to speak of manners after I overhear you discussing my life as if it's a line item in a business ledger? Her gaze swept over him, unflinching. For 18 years, I was forgotten, left with a distant relative, given just enough to survive but never enough to feel like I belonged. Now, you drag me back here and expect me to be your obedient little pawn. I refuse. A low chuckle came from the head of the mahogany desk. Bruce Johnson, the family patriarch, had been observing the entire exchange with shrewd, calculating eyes. He tapped a gnarled finger on the polished wood, his gaze fixed on Claire. The girl has spirit, he declared, his voice a low rumble of authority that made Edward flinch. I'm impressed. He looked directly at Claire, his expression unreadable. Your father is a fool, but you are a Johnson. You will not be sold. I will give you a choice. You can come live with me under my protection, or... He paused, a glint of amusement in his eyes. You can choose someone else in this family to be your guardian. A new father, if you will. Edward's jaw went slack. Howard straightened in his chair, a flicker of genuine interest replacing his usual boredom. This was unprecedented. The old man was writing the rules on the spot. Claire's eyes scanned the room. She looked at Edward's impotent rage, then at her grandfather's powerful, manipulative calm. Finally, her gaze landed on Howard, the notorious playboy, the family disappointment, the man who lived for nothing but fleeting pleasures. He was a disaster. He was perfect. Without a moment of hesitation, she raised her hand and pointed a steady finger directly at him. I want him, she said, her voice ringing with absolute certainty. I want him to be my dad. The ensuing silence was a physical thing, thick and suffocating. Edward looked as if he might have a stroke. Bruce's eyebrows shot up into his hairline, and Howard stared at her as if she had just announced he was a talking alligator. 2 days later, Claire was living in a gilded cage. Howard's residence was less a home and more a monument to extravagant excess, a sprawling, minimalist mansion of glass and steel that felt cold and impersonal. Her room, however, was a fairy tale. A canopied bed with silk sheets, a walk-in closet overflowing with designer clothes she didn't know how to pronounce, and a vanity table that looked like it belonged to a movie star. It was a world away from her cramped attic room. Yet she felt just as isolated, Mrs. Cooper, a housekeeper with a perpetually weary but kind expression, bustled in with a tray of tea. "Don't you worry, dear. Mr. Howard will be back eventually," she said, setting the tray down. Well, he's Mr. Howard. What is he like?" Claire asked, her voice soft. Mrs. Cooper sighed, a lifetime of exasperation in the sound. "He has a new sports car delivered every other month. He hosts card games that go all night. He has a bar in the West Wing that looks like a nightclub. And," she lowered her voice conspiratorially, "he has this absurd obsession with his pet crocodiles. Keeps them in a heated terrarium by the pool. Calls them his little cuties. He's been gone since you arrived. Parting with his friends." Claire's expression crumpled. She manufactured a perfect, heartbreaking quiver in her lower lip. A single, crystalline tear traced a path down her cheek. "He doesn't want me here," she whispered, her voice cracking with practiced sorrow. "Mrs. Cooper, he's not coming home because he doesn't care about me at all." The housekeeper's heart melted. "Oh, you poor thing, of course he does. He's just immature." Right on cue, the front door slammed open. Howard strode in, sunglasses on despite it being evening, looking rumpled from a night out. He froze when he saw Claire's tears, his entire carefree demeanor dissolving into sheer panic. "What's wrong? Why is she crying?" he demanded, rushing to her side. He knelt down, his expensive suit wrinkling on the marble floor. "Hey, what happened? Did someone hurt you?" He looked utterly lost, like a man who knew how to handle a stock market crash but was completely baffled by a sad teenage girl. "Don't cry, please. I'll buy you anything. We'll go to an amusement park. I'll buy you 100 dresses. A pony." Claire looked at him through her tear-filled eyes, her expression the perfect blend of innocence and pain. "She had him. It's just," she sniffled, "Mrs. Cooper told me about all your things. Your parties and your cars. And your alligators." She looked him directly in the eye, her voice a small, wounded whisper. "Are your games and your little cuties more important than me?" The question struck him like a physical blow. He stared at her, at the genuine-looking hurt on her face, and something inside him shifted. The playboy facade cracked, revealing a man desperate for a purpose beyond his own amusement. He was 30 years old, and for the first time, someone needed him, truly needed him. He stood up abruptly, a wild, determined look on his face. He pulled out his phone, his thumbs flying across the screen. "Assistant Lynn," he barked into the receiver. "Sell them. Sell all of it." There was a confused squawk on the other end. "Sir." "Sell what?" "Everything," Howard declared, pacing the room with newfound righteous fury. "Sell the cars, all 7 of them. Get rid of the bar. Cancel my poker club membership. And find a zoo that will take good care of my alligators. I'm a father now. I have responsibilities." He hung up, breathing heavily, a man reborn. He turned back to Claire, a proud, triumphant smile on his face, expecting to see her beaming with happiness. But Claire was simply watching him, the last of her crocodile tears already dry, her gaze sharp and calculating. A flicker of a victorious smile touched her lips before she expertly concealed it behind a mask of relieved gratitude. The game had just begun. Sunlight streamed into the West Wing ballroom, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like scattered diamonds. It was a room Howard hadn't entered in years, now repurposed as his personal crucible. He stood unnaturally still, a thick leather-bound book balanced precariously on his head, his spine ramrod straight in a posture that felt both alien and excruciating. Claire circled him like a hawk, her expression one of serene, unyielding focus. Her simple white blouse and tailored slacks were a stark contrast to the room's gilded, forgotten opulence, making her seem all the more modern and in command. "Your left shoulder is drooping, Howard," A gentleman does not slouch. He occupies his space with intent. He groaned, the sound echoing in the cavernous room. Intent on what? Developing a permanent back spasm? How much longer must I endure this medieval torture? The book wobbled. Until it becomes second nature, she replied, her voice smooth and even. She paused in front of him, her gaze analytical. We aren't aiming for good enough. We are building the man who will command the respect of Bruce Johnson. Perfection is not a goal. It is the starting point. Howard met her eyes in the grand, gold-leafed mirror that lined the wall. The frustration in his own reflection warred with a grudging admiration for the woman before him. She didn't just want him to change. She was architecting his ascent. Perfection, he grumbled, adjusting his shoulder. Easy for you to say. You're not the one about to be crushed by war and peace. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched Claire's lips. Think of it less as etiquette training and more as a campaign. Every straight line you walk, every perfectly executed bow, it's a strategic move in our plan to seize the throne. The phrase, dramatic as it was, landed with surprising weight. Seize the throne. It ignited a flicker of the old rebellion in him. But this time, it was focused, channeled. This wasn't just about pleasing his grandfather anymore. It was about winning for them. The next few days were a blur of transformation. The ballroom gave way to a dressing room overflowing with bespoke suits from Savile Row. Howard stood before a triptych mirror, turning slowly as a tailor pinned a charcoal wool jacket to his frame. The fabric felt foreign, constricting. He was used to the soft give of worn leather, the casual freedom of a t-shirt. This version of himself, sharp, elegant, formidable, felt like a character he was learning to play. Too stiff, he muttered, tugging at the collar. Claire, observing from an armchair, shook her head. The suit isn't stiff, Howard, you are. You're wearing it like a costume. You need to own it. She rose and walked to him, her fingers deftly adjusting his silk tie. Her touch was light, professional, yet it sent a jolt through him. This is your new armor. Downstairs, in the hushed corridors of the mansion, the stuffed whispers were a testament to her success. Have you seen the young master? A maid murmured to the head butler. He's different, the butler, a man who had served the Johnson family for 40 years, polished a silver tray with deliberate slowness. Master Bruce lectured him for decades about his conduct. All to no avail. Miss Claire arrives, says a few quiet words, and suddenly he's a different man. It's remarkable. Later that evening, they sat on the terrace, a comfortable silence settling between them. The grueling day was over. Howard swirled the amber liquid in his glass, the city lights twinkling below like a fallen constellation. He finally broke the quiet. You know, he said, a wry smile playing on his lips, I still have nightmares about that crocodile stew. Claire looked over, a genuine warmth in her eyes. It was a memory from weeks ago. A test from his grandfather that he'd only passed because Claire had calmly coached him through the revolting meal. You ate every last bite. For you, he admitted, his voice dropping an octave. I did it for you. To see that look of triumph on your face when Grandpa Bruce had nothing left to criticize. He paused, looking directly at her. Making you happy. Seeing this ridiculous, brilliant plan of yours work, it makes all the pasture lessons and reptile dinners worth it. In that moment, the line between their strategic alliance and something far deeper blurred into non-existence. Meanwhile, across town, the atmosphere was thick with resentment. In his private lounge, surrounded by dark mahogany and the scent of expensive whiskey, Edward Johnson stared into his glass, his jaw tight with fury. He had cast Claire aside like a worthless trinket, a country bumpkin unfit for his world, only to watch her become the most valuable asset in his cousin's arsenal. Howard, the family joke, was being polished into a princely rival, and it was all her doing. He had handed his enemy the perfect weapon. His mother, Eleanor, swept into the room, her silk gown whispering against the Persian rug. Brooding won't change anything, Edward. It's just a phase. Howard is playing a part, and that girl is pulling the strings. It's temporary. It doesn't look temporary, he snapped, slamming his glass down. Grandfather is starting to notice him. He actually mentioned Howard's newfound maturity at the club. Eleanor's lips thinned into a dismissive line. Let him have his moment. Your cousin is a feral cat taught to perform a few tricks. He will revert to his nature soon enough. Besides, she added, her voice dripping with condescension, Yolanda is far superior to that little nobody. She has a plan that will remind everyone of the true Johnson heiress. As if on cue, Yolanda appeared in the doorway, a triumphant smirk on her perfectly made-up face. She held a velvet-lined case in her hands. Mother is right, brother. Let the black sheep have his makeover. I have something far more substantial for Grandpa's birthday gala. She opened the case, revealing not jewelry, but several pieces of yellowed parchment covered in delicate, faded musical notation, a fragmented score. She announced, her eyes gleaming with malicious pride. The long-lost melody, Beyond the Clouds, composed by Princess Jessica of the Fallen Dynasty. I had agents scouring antique markets for months to piece it together. Edward leaned forward, intrigued. Their grandfather was a passionate historian and a devotee of classical music. This was a masterstroke. I've been practicing day and night, Yolanda continued, her voice a purr of self-satisfaction. When I perform this for him, a piece no one has heard in centuries, it will be the only thing anyone talks about. Claire's little puppet will be nothing more than a well-dressed footnote. Excellent, my daughter, Eleanor said, placing a hand on Yolanda's shoulder. Prepare well. This performance will secure your position. It will prove to your grandfather where the real talent and dedication in this family lies. Yolanda's gaze hardened, her ambition twisting into something venomous. She pictured Claire's composed face, the quiet confidence that so infuriated her. This wasn't just about impressing her grandfather anymore. It was about annihilation. I'll crush you, she thought, the vow a silent, vicious promise. I'll stand in the spotlight, and you'll be nothing but a shadow beneath my heel. The grand ballroom of the Johnson family mansion shimmered, a sea of champagne flutes and diamond earrings. Yet, beneath the veneer of polite chatter, a current of malicious gossip flowed, all directed at one conspicuously empty chair. Can you believe Bruce actually invited Howard? A woman whispered behind her fan, her eyes scanning the grand entrance. After the Mykonos incident, I heard he tried to pay the hotel damage with a casino chip. Her companion snickered. Edward told my husband that the boy is a lost cause. He said we shouldn't be surprised if he shows up drunk. Or not at all. It's a testament to Edward's patience that he even tolerates him. The heavy oak doors at the far end of the hall swung open. A sudden, collective hush fell over the room, so profound that the clink of a distant fork sounded like a crack of thunder. Every head turned. Standing in the doorway was Howard Johnson, but not the one they knew. The reckless playboy with the disheveled hair and insolent smirk was gone. In his place stood a man forged from steel and shadow. His bespoke tuxedo was cut to perfection, accenting the formidable breadth of his shoulders. His hair was styled with precision, and his jaw was set with a cold, almost regal authority. He moved with an unhurried grace, his presence so commanding that it seemed to shrink the cavernous room around him. Beside him, Claire was a vision of understated elegance, her simple gown a quiet counterpoint to the powerful aura radiating from the man she had so completely remade. The guests stared, their mockery dying on their lips, replaced by slack-jawed disbelief. Across the room, Edward's wine glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. He didn't notice. His eyes were locked on his cousin, a venomous confusion twisting his features. This wasn't the buffoon he'd planned to humiliate. This was a rival, a king. At the head table, Grandpa Bruce pushed himself to his feet, his frail hands gripping the tablecloth. Tears welled in his old eyes, shimmering with a pride he had long since buried. He raised his glass, his voice trembling but clear, ringing with emotion. "Claire," he began, his gaze finding her. "You came to me and made a promise. You said you would bring me a grandson I could be proud of." He swept his arm towards Howard, who met his gaze with a newfound steadiness. "Tonight you have not only kept your word, you have exceeded all my hopes. Your task is complete." "Very, very well done." A smattering of stunned applause rippled through the hall. Bruce's assistant stepped forward, presenting a velvet-lined box. Inside, nestled against the dark fabric, was not jewelry, but a key and a thick sheaf of documents. "As your reward," Bruce declared, his voice booming with satisfaction, "I give you the deed to Lark Villa." A collective gasp swept the room. Lark Villa wasn't just a house. It was a legendary clifftop estate, a landmark worth $1 billion. Edward's face went pale, then purple with rage. "Grandfather," he choked out, taking a step forward. "You can't be serious. $1 billion property for what? Getting him to wear a suit?" Bruce's gaze turned to ice. "She did what you, with all your resources, could not. She gave this family back its dignity." Howard watched Edward's fury with a cool detachment. He didn't care about his cousin's theatrics. His attention was solely on Claire, whose eyes were wide with shock as she held the deed. He felt a surge of fierce, protective pride. Every grueling etiquette lesson, every pre-dawn workout, every moment of her infuriatingly strict discipline, it was all worth it to see this look of triumph on her face, to feel this validation from the one man whose opinion mattered. Their bond, forged in a transactional agreement, now felt like something solid and real, an anchor in the treacherous waters of his family. Sensing the spotlight shifting irrevocably, Yolanda rushed to the stage where a grand piano sat waiting. She tapped the microphone, her smile brittle. "For my gift to Grandpa Bruce, I will be performing a very special piece. With my father's help, I was fortunate enough to acquire a fragmented score of the legendary lost composition, Princess Jessica's melody, Beyond the Clouds." A murmur of excitement went through the crowd. The melody was a myth, a piece so beautiful it was said to have been divinely inspired. Yolanda began to play, her fingers moving across the keys with practiced skill. The melody was indeed beautiful, ethereal and haunting. But it ended abruptly, hanging in the air like an unfinished sentence, leaving the audience feeling a sense of profound incompleteness. "Such a shame." Grandpa Bruce sighed, his earlier joy tempered with melancholy. "To think the world will never hear that masterpiece in its entirety." "Perhaps it will," a calm voice said. Claire stepped forward from beside Howard. She moved towards the stage, her composure absolute. "Grandpa, my gift for you is the complete version of melody, Beyond the Clouds." Laughter erupted. Edward sneered openly. "You don't be ridiculous, Claire. You're a country bumpkin who got lucky. Yolanda is a classically trained musician. Where would you have possibly found the complete score when scholars have searched for centuries?" Yolanda smirked from the stage. "Please, don't embarrass yourself for a little attention." Claire ignored them. She sat at the piano, her posture serene. For a moment, she closed her eyes, and when she opened them, the world seemed to fall away. Her fingers touched the keys. The music that filled the hall was nothing like Yolanda's polite recital. This was a living, breathing entity, an ancient, soul-stirring melody that spoke of starlit skies and forgotten sorrows. It was intricate and powerful, weaving a tapestry of sound so exquisite it silenced every whisper, every breath. Then, the miracle happened. On the tables near the stage, the deep red wine in the glasses began to move. Tiny, perfect ripples emanated from the center of each glass, dancing in perfect sync with the rising and falling cadence of Claire's music. It was impossible, a trick of the light. Yet everyone saw it. At a table in the corner, an elderly man with a shock of white hair shot to his feet, his eyes wide with awe. The ripples he breathed, his voice trembling. The legend is true. Heads turned. It was Lucas White, the world-renowned concert pianist and musical historian. The ancient text described it. He announced to the stunned room, his voice filled with reverence. They said the true melody beyond the clouds possessed a resonance so perfect, a frequency so pure, it could move water. They called it the sound that moves water. He stared at Claire, his expression one of utter veneration. I never believed it was possible. I have spent 50 years studying this piece, and I am witnessing a myth come to life. The final note of the song hung in the air, shimmering with impossible power. Then, a deafening silence. Every eye was on Claire, the country bumpkin, the imposter, the woman who had just performed a miracle. On the stage, Yolanda's face was a mask of horrified disbelief, while Edward looked as though he had just seen a ghost. The tide had not just turned, it had become a tidal wave, and it was about to wash them all away. The final, resonant note from Claire's guzheng hung in the grand ballroom, a shimmering thread of sound that held 100 conversations captive. The silence that followed was not empty, but filled with a collective, breathless awe. Then, as if a spell had been broken, the room erupted in a thunder of applause. A standing ovation led by the two most influential men present, Grandpa Bruce Johnson and the venerable Master Lucas White. Grandpa Bruce's eyes, usually sharp with the shrewdness of a business magnate, now sparkled with unused tears of pure joy. He rose from his seat, his voice booming over the waning applause. In all my 80 years, he declared, his gaze fixed on Claire, I have received countless gifts. But this piece of living history you have given us, Claire, this is, without a doubt, the best gift of all. From the sigh, Yolanda's face was a mask of disbelief, her perfect smile frozen and brittle. She had engineered this moment for Claire's humiliation, not her coronation. Her mother whispered furiously beside her. But Grandpa Bruce wasn't finished. He turned a glacial stare toward them. Yolanda, you insisted Claire perform, certain she would make a fool of herself. It seems you simply asked for trouble and found it. The dismissal was public, surgical, and utterly devastating. Yolanda visibly flinched, her social standing evaporating under the weight of his words. Before the whispers could fully take root, Master Lucas White, his face alight with scholarly passion, approached the stage. Miss Claire, he said, his voice trembling with excitement, that composition, it is a lost national treasure. I must insist for the sake of our country's cultural heritage that you allow me to help you record the full score. Your talent is a gift to us all. Claire, still overwhelmed, could only nod, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was more than she had ever dreamed. Beaming with a pride that seemed to make him 10 years younger, Grandpa Bruce clapped Howard on the shoulder. Did you see that? Bo, she has brought true honor to our family. He then faced the assembled guests and made an announcement that sent a shockwave through the room. As a reward for her immense contribution, and as a welcoming gift to the family, I am officially transferring 10% of my personal shares in the Johnson Group to my granddaughter-in-law, Claire. The ballroom descended into a maelstrom of gasps and frantic murmurs. 10%. It was a king's ransom, a stake large enough to shift the balance of power within the entire corporation. Across the room, Edward felt the blood drain from his face. 10%. That was more than he had earned in a decade of slavish work. Howard, the useless playboy, now controlled a significant portion of the company through this country bumpkin. His meticulously constructed plans, his future as the heir apparent, were crumbling into dust. Despair warred with the volcanic, searing rage inside him. Grandpa Bruce, oblivious to his grandson's inner turmoil, beckoned Claire down from the stage. "Come, my dear. Master White and I have some old friends you must meet." He then glanced at Howard, a playful but pointed glint in his eye. "You come too, Howard. A little artistic enlightenment won't hurt that thick skull of yours." It was a gentle jab at Howard's notorious past, but it was affectionate, a sign of a bond being reforged. As they walked away, a small, triumphant family unit, Edward's hand tightened around his phone. His knuckles were white. He saw his assistant, Mark, lingering near the exit. He caught his eye, gave a sharp, almost imperceptible nod and typed a single, cold message. "Proceed as planned." His face was a placid mask, but behind it, a final, malicious scheme was set in motion. They had been mingling for no more than 10 minutes, and a commotion erupted near the ballroom's grand entrance. A woman, her face streaked with tears and her dress disheveled, shoved her way past security. She was visibly pregnant, and her presence immediately sucked the festive air out of the room. Her eyes scanned the crowd before locking on to Howard Johnson. She shrieked, her voice cracking with manufactured despair. "You coward, do you think you can just abandon me? Abandon our baby?" A wave of horrified gasps swept through the guests. Phones were discreetly raised. This was a scandal far more titillating than any musical performance. The woman staggered forward, clutching her stomach. "You told me you loved me, and when I told you I was pregnant, you tried to pay me off." She collapsed to her knees, a dark stain suddenly blossoming on the pale fabric of her dress near her thigh. "Oh God, no," she wailed, her hand coming away slick with what looked horrifyingly like blood. "I'm bleeding. You're making me lose our baby." The scene devolved into chaos. Women screamed. Men shouted for a doctor. Grandpa Bruce's face, which had been alight with joy moments before, was now a thunderous mask of fury and deep, profound disappointment. He whirled on Howard, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "You fool! Have you learned nothing? Is this what you do with the second chance I've given you?" Another scandal, just like that incident 9 years ago. The reference hit Howard like a physical blow. A past mistake, a misunderstanding he had been blamed for, was now being used as the definitive proof of his guilt. "Grandpa, I swear, I don't know this woman," he pleaded, his voice desperate as he tried to push through the wall of judging eyes. "I've never seen her before in my life." But his denials were lost in the woman's escalating sobs and the growing uproar. The evidence seemed damning. For Grandpa Bruce, it was the final straw. The humiliation was unbearable. "Enough," he roared, his voice silencing the entire room. "This banquet is over. Everyone, leave." He pointed a trembling finger at Howard. "And you will go to the ancestral hall and reflect on the shame you have brought upon this family. I don't want to see your face until you are ready to confess." Defeated, Howard's shoulders slumped. He shot a look of despair at Claire before security guards began to escort him away. Edward watched from the corner, a thin, triumphant smirk gracing his lips. It was over. But it wasn't. As the guests began to file out, buzzing with the salacious gossip, Claire did not move. Her mind was racing, her gaze fixed on the weeping woman on the floor. Something was wrong. The blood was too bright, too syrupy, and the woman's sobs, while loud, lacked the ragged, breathless panic of true terror. Claire stepped forward, her voice cutting through the remaining chaos, clear and calm. "Wait." All eyes turned to her. The woman on the floor looked up, a flicker of panic in her tear-filled eyes. Claire knelt down, not too close, her expression one of polite concern. "You're bleeding. That's terrible. We must get you to a hospital immediately." She turned to the hotel manager. "Please call an ambulance, and have your on-site doctor come here right now to administer first aid." The woman's wailing hitched. "No, I don't need a doctor. Just get him to take responsibility." Claire's eyes narrowed. "If you're having a miscarriage, you could bleed to death." A doctor is essential. Unless, of course, she said, her voice dropping, you're not actually bleeding. Claire's gaze flicked to the man who had been hovering near the door, the same man Edward had nodded at. And you? She called out, pointing directly at Mark, Edward's assistant. You seem very concerned. You were the one who let her bypass security, weren't you? Strange for an executive assistant to be working the door. Mark froze, his face paling. Edward, seeing his plan unraveling, started to move toward the exit. Don't even think about it, Edward, Claire said, not even looking at him. Her attention was solely on the woman. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a silk handkerchief, dabbing lightly at the edge of the stain on the woman's dress before she could react. Claire brought it to her nose. Corn syrup, food coloring, and is that a hint of strawberry fragrance? She asked, her voice dangerously soft. A very theatrical choice. The woman stared at her, horrified. The entire room was silent, watching the truth unfold. He paid you, didn't he? Claire continued, her gaze finally shifting to a frozen Edward. He paid you to ruin Howard, to ruin this night, because he couldn't stand to see his grandfather finally show Howard the love he deserved. He couldn't stand that the country bumpkin, held more value to this family in one night than he had in a lifetime of scheming, under the weight of 100 stares. The woman broke. He made me do it, she sobbed, pointing a real, trembling finger at Edward, Mr. Johnson's grandson. He promised me money to pay for my real baby's medical bills. He gave me this pouch of fake blood. The confession hung in the air, damning and absolute. Grandpa Bruce, who had been watching with dawning horror, turned his gaze upon Edward. The fury from before was nothing compared to the cold, bottomless rage that now filled his eyes. Edward, he rasped, his voice trembling with betrayal. You would frame your own brother. You would destroy this family's reputation for shares. Edward stood paralyzed, his mask of civility shattered, revealing the ugly ambition beneath. He didn't deserve it. He spat, his composure finally snapping. That playboy gets everything handed to him. While I worked, I deserved it. Security, Grandpa Bruce commanded, his voice like cracking ice. Escort Mr. Edward out. He is no longer an employee of the Johnson Group, nor a member of this family. Call the police. As Edward was dragged away, shouting empty threats, Grandpa Bruce walked slowly over to Howard, who had been released by the guards and stood watching in stunned silence. The old man's shoulders sank with the weight of his error. Howard, he said, his voice thick with regret. My boy, I am so sorry. I let the past blind me. I should have trusted you. Howard simply looked at his grandfather, and for the first time in years, the wall between them crumbled. He nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. The ballroom was nearly empty now, a wreckage of a celebration. Amidst the scattered confetti and abandoned glasses, Howard turned to Claire. The nose, the accusations, the drama, it all faded away until there was only her. She stood there, serene and unshakable. The woman who had not only restored a lost piece of history, and had saved him from it. Claire, he began, his voice raw with emotion. You didn't just give my grandfather a gift. You gave me back my family. You gave me back me. He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. They felt small but strong, the same hands that could command 1,000 years of music and unravel a web of lies. I thought, he murmured, his gaze searching hers, that bringing you into this family was a way for me to survive. I was wrong. It's the reason I want to live, truly live. He saw the answer in her eyes before he even asked the question. He saw the same fierce loyalty, the same deep, unwavering affection that he felt for her. The arranged marriage, the clever schemes, the fight for inheritance, it had all been a prelude. My family, Claire, he whispered, his thumb caressing her knuckles, not as a contract, not as a strategy. For real, A slow smile spread across her face, lighting up her features and chasing away the last shadows of the night. "I thought I already was," she replied softly. In the quiet of the ruined ballroom, surrounded by the ghosts of a battle won, they had found their conclusive ending. It wasn't about shares or status. It was about justice, and the love that had proven strong enough to bring a lost soul home. The air in Bruce Johnson's study was thick with the stench of old prejudice and fresh accusation. Bruce, his face a thundercloud of disappointment, slammed a hand on his mahogany desk. The tremor vibrated through the room. 9 years. 9 years, and you've learned nothing, Howard. It's the same sordid mess all over again. A woman, a child, and your name dragged through the mud. When will you stop disgracing this family? Eleanor, Edward's mother, fanned the flames with practiced ease, her voice dripping with sanctimonious pity. "Father, don't upset yourself. Some apples are simply rotten from the start. We've given him every chance. While my Edward works day and night for the company, Howard, he only knows how to create scandals." Howard stood before the desk, his shoulders slumped, a ghost of his usual swagger. The fight had drained out of him, leaving a hollow shell. He had denied it, but his words were wine against the hurricane of their conviction. From her quiet corner, Claire stepped forward, her voice, calm and clear, sliced through the tension. "Grandma Eleanor, you speak with such certainty. Were you there when the child was conceived?" Eleanor sputtered, her perfectly powdered face tightening. "What a ridiculous question. The proof is all over the news. The news reports what it's told," Claire countered, her gaze shifting to Edward, who stood beside his mother, the very picture of a concerned brother. "And Edward, you were remarkably efficient. The story broke less than an hour ago. Yet you've already been to the hospital, spoken with the mother, and confirmed the details for Grandpa. The press is camped outside that building like wolves. How did you get in and out so quickly, so discreetly?" Edward's composure flickered. "I have my ways. I was concerned for the family's reputation, or," Claire suggested, a voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "you didn't need to go at all, because you already knew every detail of the script you helped write." She turned back to Bruce, her expression earnest and unwavering. "Grandpa, from the moment that woman appeared, her story felt rehearsed to perfect. I suspected someone might try to use Howard's reputation against him, especially now." A seed of doubt, small but potent, took root in Bruce's hardened expression. Claire gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod towards the door. "So I asked Mrs. Cooper to take a precaution on cue." The study door opened. Mrs. Cooper, the family's head housekeeper, entered with a brisk, no-nonsense stride. She carried a single sealed manila envelope, which she placed on the desk directly in front of Bruce. "Sir," she said, her voice steady, "the hospital courier just delivered this. It's the result of the expedited paternal blood typing analysis. I procured a sample from the child's discarded juice box at the hospital cafe, and we had Mr. Howard's on file." The silence in the room was absolute. Eleanor and Edward stared at the envelope as if it were a coiled snake. Howard's head snapped up, his eyes wide with a dawning, incredulous hope. With trembling fingers, Bruce tore open the seal. His eyes scanned the document, his breath catching in his throat. The clinical, black and white text was irrefutable. Paternity exclusion. 99.999%. The paper slipped from Bruce's grasp, fluttering onto the plush carpet. He stared at Howard, his face a canvas of shock, shame, and a profound, gut-wrenching remorse. He had done it again. He had condemned his grandson without a trial, blinded by the shadows of the past. Eleanor was speechless, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, while Edward's handsome face was a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. His perfect plan had been dismantled by a country girl with more foresight than his entire team. Later, The weight of the moment settled in the somber quiet of the Johnson ancestral hall. Bruce, in a fit of residual anger and confusion, had ordered Howard to kneel and reflect, a punishment delivered before the truth had fully sunk in. Now, though exonerated, Howard remained, kneeling on a silk cushion before the memorial tablets of his ancestors. The victory in the study felt hollow here, a temporary reprieve in a lifelong war. Claire found him there, his back rigid, his jaw clenched. She didn't speak. She simply walked over, gathered her simple skirt and knelt on the cushion beside him. The silent act of solidarity was more powerful than any words of comfort could ever be. For a long time, they stayed like that. Then, a shudder racked Howard's frame. "He never believes me," he bit out, his voice raw with a pain that went far beyond the day's events. "He never believes me. He looks at me and all he sees is a mistake. Edward can do no wrong, and I can do no right. Your anger is just sadness in disguise," Claire said softly, her eyes fixed on the carved names in front of them. "This isn't the first time, is it? 9 years ago it was the same." Her gentle guess broke the dam. The anger dissolved, replaced by a wave of crushing despair. "It wasn't just the same," Howard confessed, his voice cracking. "It was identical, the same setup, the same false accusations, the same look of disappointment on Grandpa's face." He turned to her, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Edward did it. Both times. 9 years ago. He paid a woman to frame me. He even had a doctor on his payroll to fake the paternity test. I was barely 20. I didn't know how to fight back." He took a ragged breath, the full, ugly truth spilling out. "He didn't just want to embarrass me. He wants to destroy me. He wants me disinherited. He wants every last share of the Johnson group. He sees me as the only obstacle between him and absolute control." As he spoke, a quiet understanding settled over Claire. This was never about sibling rivalry. It was a cold, calculated war of attrition, waged for years in the shadows of the family. And across the estate, in his study, a newly suspicious Bruce Johnson picked up the phone. Claire's pointed questions about Edward's impossible speed had reopened a wound he'd long tried to forget. "Tom," he said to his head of security, his voice grim, "pull everything you have on that incident from 9 years ago. Everything. I want to know who that woman was, who her doctor was, and I want to know exactly where Edward was the night it all happened." Back in the ancestral hall, Howard's confession subsided, leaving an exhausted quiet in its wake. He looked at Claire, truly looked at her, and for the first time, she saw the man behind the Playboy mask, wounded, betrayed, but not broken. "You," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you were the only one who believed me without a single doubt." In that shared moment of vulnerability and trust, their strange, strategic alliance was forged into something far stronger. He was not just her adopted father, and she was not just his clever ward. They were allies, survivors, and the only two people in this gilded cage who truly saw each other.